4 hours on the Salt Meridian, the road still hadn't bent. I'd driven freight across most of the restricted routes in the southwest, the corridor, the gravel line, the 900-mile loop they called the Jaw. But the Meridian was something else. It ran straight through the desert floor like a surveyor's mistake. 5 lanes of military-grade asphalt cutting through salt flats without a single curve for the first 100 miles. The 5 lanes ran without shoulders or exits, with white ground stretching to the horizon on both sides, broken by the occasional faded warning post marking buried ordnance from tests conducted decades before I was born. My rig held steady at 64. The briefing had been specific about that number. 60 was the floor. Below 60, the cargo's containment protocols could not be guaranteed. That was the word they used, guaranteed. The briefing left the connection between speed and containment unexplained, along with the consequences of failure. They gave me the number. I held the number. At the briefing, I'd asked how long under 60 counted as a failure. The officer looked down at his tablet and said, "Long enough for the Corps to recognize that transport has ended." He wouldn't define long enough. The second rule was simpler. Do not activate the rearview display. Every anomalous freight rig had one. A digital screen mounted above the windshield, linked to a camera inside the containment trailer. Standard practice on most runs. You watched your cargo the way a bus driver watches passengers, checking for shifts, thermal events, structural creep. If an inspection arch couldn't resolve a seal, the driver routed that same camera through the convoy's verification channel and talked a technician through the image. I'd done enough manual handoffs to know which status lights meant a gate had accepted a live feed. On this run, the screen was dark, powered down. The briefing packet had included a laminated instruction card zip-tied to the sun visor. Rearview display. Do not activate under any condition. Report trailer status via convoy commander only. 2 rules. Stay fast, stay blind. I'd hauled worse. Or at least I thought I had. "Palmer, speed check." Frank Morrow's voice came through the closed radio channel. Morrow drove the front vehicle, an armored command car running 200 yards ahead of my bumper, bristling with antenna masts but stripped of every mirror and camera. I'd noticed that during the convoy briefing at the staging yard. His vehicle had no rear-view capability at all. Direct instruments only. Armored observation slits. At the time, I'd figured it was a cost-saving refit. Now, 4 hours into the run, it seemed more intentional than that. 64 and holding, I said. Keep it there. We'll check the seals again at the next inspection arch. The inspection arches were unmanned sensor gates spanning the road every 200 miles or so. Steel and concrete frames packed with scanning equipment. They read cargo seals, checked containment integrity, logged convoy status. If they detected a breach, they could deploy road barriers and lock a vehicle in place until a recovery team arrived. Recovery teams on the Meridian had a response time measured in days. Behind me, 2 escort trucks held position, one on my left quarter, one trailing by 50 yards. Ex-military rigs with light armor. Their drivers were agency men, quiet on the radio, running under call signs instead of names. I hadn't spoken to either of them since we cleared the Meridian's entry gate 4 hours ago. The convoy was tight. The road was empty. Everything was procedure. I checked the trailer's instrument panel. The readout I was allowed. Weight distribution, axle load, tire pressure, coolant status for the containment system. All nominal. The cargo manifest listed the contents as autonomous weapon core, Class 4, static configuration. I'd hauled Class 3 components before, things that needed cooling or magnetic isolation during transport. Class 4 was new to me. The briefing hadn't elaborated beyond maintain speed and display protocols. 6 months earlier, during what I'd thought was a routine medical review at the agency's freight depot in Barstow, a tech had run a series of tests I couldn't quite account for. Visual tracking exercises, nerve conduction measurements on both arms. a scan that required me to sit still inside a chamber, while something mapped the electrical activity in my spine. I'd asked what it was for. Baseline neurological profile, the text said. New requirement for all Class 4 rated drivers. I hadn't thought much of it since. The weight shifted during a long, imperceptible curve. I felt it through the seat before the instruments caught up. The trailer's load balance tilted, not much, maybe 2%, toward the starboard side, then corrected itself, smoothly. Something inside had leaned into the turn, then settled back to center. Static components don't do that. I toggled the radio. Morrow, I'm getting a weight shift in the trailer, 2% lateral, self-correcting. A pause, then thermal expansion in the casing. It happens with these units. The core housing adjusts to ambient heat differentials. Nothing to flag. The answer came fast. Too specific. Convoy commanders don't know the thermal behavior of individual cargo types. They're logistics officers. They manage routes, timing, fuel margins. The cargo's physical properties belong to the containment engineers who loaded it. Morrow knew things about what I was carrying that a convoy commander shouldn't. I filed it, kept driving. The salt flats poured past on both sides, white as old bone, 64 miles per hour. The display stayed dark above my head. 20 minutes later, Escort 2, the truck trailing me, broke radio silence. Contact south, dust trail, parallel course, roughly 3 miles out. Could be 2 vehicles. Morrow responded immediately. Titan formation. Palmer, bring it to 68. Escorts close the gap. Scavengers. They were a known variable on the Meridian. Small vehicle packs operating out of the derelict service stations that dotted the old weapons range, targeting freight convoys for fuel, parts, whatever they could strip at speed. The agency budgeted for them the way a shipping company budgets for weather delays. A cost of doing business across roughly 700 miles of abandoned military territory. I brought the rig up to 68. The convoy tightened. The dust trail held pace to the south, a smudge against the white ground, matching us mile for mile. They hit the rear escort first. The reservoir bed was a mile-wide depression, cracked white hardpan that shook the trailer on its mounts. The road surface was rougher here, patched with gravel where the original asphalt had buckled under decades of heat. I was watching my speed, compensating for the surface change, when the explosion lifted Escort 2's rear axle off the ground. The blast came from below, a buried charge, either pressure-triggered or command-detonated, planted in the road surface where the gravel patches made fresh digging invisible. The Escort's rear tires disintegrated. The truck slewed sideways at 68 miles per hour, throwing a curtain of shattered rubber across the road behind me. I saw it in my side mirror. The driver fighting the wheel, the cab tilting, the whole rig scraping across the asphalt on bare rims. His microphone opened without a call. I heard the wheel ratcheting through his hands. One hard burst of breath, then metal folding around the cab. The channel died before the truck stopped moving. Then the scavenger vehicles appeared. 4 of them, rising out of the reservoir bed's southern edge where the terrain dropped just enough to conceal an approach. Modified pickups, stripped of doors, fitted with welded roll cages. A heavier vehicle behind them, a repurposed military flatbed with a mounted gun bolted to its bed. They closed on the crippled escort at highway speed, fanning out to bracket it. "Contact rear," Escort 1 called. "2 is down." Small arms fire stitched across Escort 1's left flank. A second group of scavengers had come from the north, hidden by the road's slight elevation above the reservoir floor. Escort 1's driver swerved toward me, trying to use my trailer as cover. Rounds sparked off his armor plating. One of his tires burst. He fishtailed, corrected, then took another volley that punched through his observation port. The glass blew inward. The truck drifted, overcorrected, drifted again. "Morrow, both escorts are taking fire. Keep your speed. Do not slow down." Morrow's voice hadn't changed, the same tone he'd used for the weight shift report. "They're after the escorts, not the cargo. Maintain 68. He was right about the scavengers' target. They were stripping the escort trucks. Fuel, weapons, parts. They didn't know what was in my trailer. But the flatbed with the mounted gun had swung wide of the engagement, circling around the wreckage, its driver watching my rig with the kind of focus that suggested he wasn't finished. Escort 1's last transmission cut short. His truck rolled onto its side 200 yards behind me, already shrinking in the mirror. Scavenger vehicles swarmed over it before the dust settled. 2 escort trucks, gone in under 3 minutes. Morrow's command car ahead of me, my rig, nothing else. The flatbed fired. The round hit the rear of my trailer at an angle, not a direct strike. More of a grazing blow that punched through the outer shell and detonated against something structural. The trailer lurched. My instruments spiked. The containment seal indicators, solid green since the staging yard, went yellow. 2 of them went red. The impact threw a shudder through the whole rig. I felt it in the steering column, the seat frame, even the pedals. Something inside the trailer had absorbed the blast, not passively, the way armor absorbs a hit, but actively, the way a body shifts to protect a wound. Morrow, I've got seal breach. 2 indicators red, 3 yellow. The trailer took a round. How bad? Outer shell is torn open. Something structural inside took damage. The load's shifting again. 5% starboard. Not correcting. Silence. The flatbed had dropped back, satisfied or spent. The road ahead was clear. Morrow's vehicle was a dark shape 200 yards ahead, trailing dust. Palmer, I need you to activate the rearview display. I looked up at the dark screen above the windshield. The laminated card was still zip-tied to the visor. Do not activate under any condition. The briefing said, the briefing assumed the seals would hold. His voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before. Urgency overriding a decision he'd been avoiding. They didn't. I need visual confirmation of containment status. Activate the display. You told me yourself not to touch it. I know what I told you. The situation has changed. I can't assess trailer damage from my position. You're the only eyes we have. Turn it on. The trailer was still shifting behind me. 5%. Maybe 6%. Whatever the round had hit, it had changed the way the cargo sat in its housing, or the way the cargo chose to sit. I reached up, found the power switch along the display's lower edge, a small toggle recessed into the bezel, designed to be hard to hit by accident. My thumb settled on it. I flipped it. The screen filled with the grey-green wash of a low-light camera feed. I could see the trailer's interior, the containment frame, the shock mount brackets, the inner casing that held the weapon core. The scavenger's round had breached the outer shell and cracked the inner casing along a structural seam. Through the crack I could see into the core's housing. Something was looking back at me. An optic plate, smooth, dark, roughly the size of a dinner plate, set flush into the face of the weapon core. The plate was oriented directly at the camera, perfectly centered and untouched by the blast. It had been pointed at the camera for the entire run. The moment I registered what I was seeing, it hit. Compression behind my eyes, sudden, specific, like the air pressure in the cab had spiked for 1 second, then equalized. My vision blurred, sharpened. Then information began arriving that had no business being in my head. Tire pressure, all 18 wheels, each one distinct, down to the decimal. Coolant temperature in the containment system 41 degrees, stable. Engine RPM 2200. Axle torque, the exact figure under the current load distribution. The speed, 68.3 miles per hour. Not read from the dashboard, but felt. The way you feel how fast your legs carry you when you run. I could feel the damage seal. The upper right panel of the trailer held a raw opening I could locate without looking. I knew its dimensions the way I knew the size of a cut on my own skin. I pulled my eyes off the display. It didn't matter. The information kept coming. Continuous. A feed of the truck's physical state pouring into my awareness, as though I'd spent my career driving with half my senses shut off. The engine's rhythm settled into my chest like a second heartbeat, slower than my own, heavier. Morrow. Something happened. My voice sounded thicker, duller, as though I was speaking through something. Tell me what you're feeling. The emphasis landed on feeling. He already knew. I can feel the truck, all of it. Every tire, the engine, the seal breech. I can feel the road surface through the tires. It's like the sensation lay outside my experience. It's like the truck is part of my body. That's the initial calibration. It will settle. Keep driving. What do you mean by calibration? What the hell did I just... Keep driving, Palmer. Hold 68. Eyes forward. We'll discuss it at the first recovery yard. He said it smoothly. I almost believed him, but I could feel the road beneath all 18 wheels, each surface imperfection arriving in my awareness the way my feet would register gravel through thin boots. Whatever had just happened to me was beyond anything you discuss at a recovery yard. I kept my eyes below the rearview display. The optic plate remained above me, and the connection was already built. Behind me, miles of road, without an exit. Ahead, Black Basin. The thing in my trailer had just mapped my nervous system, and the only man who could explain it had told me to keep driving. The cab started changing 90 minutes after the bond. Small things at first. The armrest on my left side developed ridges that hadn't been there during the pre-run inspection, shallow grooves matching the spread of my fingers when my hand rested flat. The steering column extended a secondary grip below the main wheel, a curved bar with a shape that didn't belong to any factory specification I'd seen. The seat's lumbar support pressed harder against my lower back, tighter than padding should press, molding itself to the curvature of my spine. I ran my right hand over the armrest ridges. The metal had a give to it, a slight flex under my fingertips, as if the surface layer was newer than the rest of the cab, warmer than the surrounding steel. Morrow, the cab interior is changing. The armrest has new contact surfaces. There's a grip on the steering column that wasn't there before. Don't touch them yet. What do you mean, yet? The core is preparing integration points. It's mapping which muscles control each movement. When a threat requires a new capability, one of those contact points will become a vehicle function. Your corresponding limb supplies the motor control. You're telling me this thing is going to take over my body? One system at a time, only when there's a tactical requirement. You knew this before the run started. I knew it was possible. The display prohibition was supposed to prevent it. The seals were meant to hold. But you told me to turn on the display. Because a breached core on an open road is worse than a bonded one. An uncontained Class 4 weapon in an active scavenger zone kills everyone in reach. Palmer, you, me, and the scavengers. Worse for who, though? Because right now it feels a hell of a lot worse for me. He didn't answer that. The road entered a corridor of rusted warning posts marking the boundary of an old missile field. Buried ordnance, warheads, fuel cells, chemical rounds, planted 50 years ago during range tests, never fully cleared. The terrain roughened. Shallow depressions where buried casings had shifted over decades cracked the surface into uneven plates. The rig's speed dropped to 62, then climbed back as the suspension compensated. I could feel the adjustment through the bond, each shock absorber's effort registering in my hips like the flex of my own knees absorbing a step. 6 miles behind us, a vehicle was holding distance. I knew this because I could feel it through the trailer's rear sensor array, a capability I hadn't possessed 2 hours ago. The core had extended my awareness to include the rig's full sensor package. The trailing vehicle registered as a presence behind me, the way you'd sense someone standing at your back in a quiet room. I couldn't see it. I was certain it was there. We've got a follower, I told Morrow. One vehicle, 6 miles back, matching speed. How do you know that? I can feel it. Through the sensors. A pause on his end. The bond is integrating faster than I expected. That's the sensor mesh. The core is extending the vehicle's detection envelope through you. It's a defensive feature. It doesn't feel like a feature. It feels like I'm growing extra nerves. That's a reasonable way to describe it. The scavenger closed the gap over the next 40 minutes. A modified pickup, lighter than the flatbed that had hit my trailer, running without headlights in the late afternoon sun. Its driver was patient. He hung back, matching my speed through the rough terrain, waiting for the right moment. A surface collapse gave it to him. A sinkhole, shallow, maybe 3 feet deep, where buried ordnance had settled and the road surface had sagged, forced me to brake hard. The rig dropped to 55, then 52, suspension groaning. The trailer swayed. The instant the speedometer passed 59, the word static stopped describing anything behind me. The shock mounts released in sequence. I felt the core lift against its housing, unfolding weight away from the cradle as if the slowing truck had told it transport was over. Pressure built behind my eyes. New pathways opened across the bond, searching my body for somewhere to put what was waking up. Through the bond, I felt the scavenger surge forward, its engine note rising in my awareness the way approaching footsteps would register in an empty hallway. He pulled alongside the trailer's damaged section. Through my newly acquired sensor mesh, I could feel the vibration of his vehicle against the outer shell, the bump of tires against torn paneling, the scrape of metal as he matched my speed. A second man stood in the pickup's bed, clipped to the roll cage by a length of cable. He planted one boot on the bedside and one on the trailer's torn lower lip. Through the sensor mesh, I felt his gloved fingers hook over the breech, then the point of a pry bar enter the split casing. He was boarding, trying to get inside the containment structure through the gap the flatbed's round had torn open. I had no weapons. The rig was built for hauling. I could swerve, try to shove him off the road, but at 52 on a collapsing surface with a shifting trailer, that was a rollover waiting to happen. The surge came without warning, pressure in my left shoulder, sudden, specific, like a hand gripping the joint from inside. My deltoid contracted as my bicep locked rigid. My forearm snapped straight, fingers splaying wide, wrist rotating until my palm pressed flat against the new armrest grip, each finger slotted into a groove. The ridges I'd felt earlier weren't ridges. They were cradles shaped precisely to my hand, down to the spacing of my knuckles. Above the cab, something rose. I felt it the way I felt my own arm, because it was my arm. A turret assembly, constructed from components that hadn't existed on this rig an hour ago, extended from the roof on an articulated mount, plating from the trailer's damaged shell, barrel from, I didn't know where the barrel came from. The core had built it. It tracked right toward the scavenger, following the pickup as it clung to the trailer's flank. The tracking was in my shoulder socket. The barrel's elevation was my wrist angle. Traverse was my elbow rotation. My fingers, locked in the armrest cradles, rested on what I understood with absolute clarity were firing contacts. I didn't choose to fire. My hand contracted, a grip reflex, involuntary, the same snap-closed motion as catching something thrown at your face, and the turret discharged. The recoil traveled from my fingertips to my shoulder. Every tendon in my left arm rang with it. The sound was a flat, percussive bark that shook the cab frame. The barrel made one final correction I felt as a twist deep in my wrist. Outside, the round went through the scavenger's hood and opened the engine block. The pickup decelerated so violently that the man at the breech swung forward on his cable. His shoulder struck the trailer's torn shell. One hand stayed hooked inside for a fraction longer than the rest of him, fingers dragging across the jagged composite. And then the pressure of his grip vanished from my sensor mesh. He folded backward across the roll cage as the pickup slewed off the road. It hit the hardpan, flipped once, came apart in a spray of glass and sheet metal. My left hand released the grip. My arm dropped against the armrest. The damaged panel still carried the last pressure pattern of the man's hand. My own fingers had made the motion that erased it. I tried to lift it. It responded. Slowly. My fingers opened when I told them to, but the motion was thick, delayed, like flexing a hand that had gone to sleep. I made a fist, opened it, made a fist again. The fine motor control was damaged. When I tried to extend my index finger on its own, my ring finger twitched with it. When I tried to rotate my wrist, the movement stuttered through 5 degrees and stopped. Above me, the turret mirrored everything. Wrist movement, the barrel elevated. Elbow rotation, The turret traversed. I dropped my arm to my lap. The turret settled into a neutral position, but I could feel it on my shoulder, a weight that existed outside my body, connected to me through wiring that used to be a nerve. I held my left palm open against my thigh. The fingers trembled with the effort. Closing them felt like giving the turret permission. "Palmer, give me a report." Morrow's voice. "The rig built a turret. It used my arm, my left arm." I was gripping the steering wheel with my right hand, squeezing too hard. "It fired on the scavenger. There was a man on the breach. I didn't pull the trigger. My hand just closed." "Motor mapping. The Corps assigned your left arm to the weapon system because it had the best firing angle. My arm isn't working right. You'll regain partial voluntary control within 20 minutes. Combat response stays mapped to the turret. The Corps won't release an assigned system." "How do you know that, Morrow?" The words landed in a different register than anything else he'd said. He sounded tired. "7 years ago," he said. "A different Corps. Same process. Mine was a steering lock. The Corps took my right arm for directional control during a vehicle pursuit. We completed the run. They extracted the Corps, transferred the bond." "You transferred it?" "To another driver. My arm came back, though never completely." "What does that mean?" "I wear a stabilization brace on my right arm, bolted at the elbow, wrist and shoulder. It locks the limb in place so it can't move on its own. Without the brace, my right arm copies whatever vehicle control surface is nearest: steering wheels, throttle levers, brake handles, even when I'm outside a vehicle. It's been 7 years, Palmer. The mapping never fully cleared." I looked down at my left hand. The fingers were moving better now. I could flex each one individually, though the ring finger still dragged behind the others by a half second. But the turret above tracked with every motion. When I flexed my wrist, the barrel elevated 5 degrees. When I curled my fingers, something in the turret's mechanism clicked, readying itself. "You knew this would happen to me. I knew it was possible. You told me to turn on the display, Morrow. You ordered me to open the channel. The seals failed. The situation, the speed requirement, the display prohibition, those weren't safety protocols, they were timing controls. Keep the driver on the road, keep him moving too fast to walk away, wait for a situation bad enough to justify the screen, then let the Corps do the rest." Morrow let the accusation hang. "We're 300 miles from Black Basin. The road gets worse from here. The Corps will prepare more integration points. Each one costs you voluntary movement in a different area. You can resist, avoid the contact surfaces, don't grip the interfaces. But if you resist, you lose whatever capability the Corps is offering. On this road, that capability is usually the thing between you and dying. What happens at Black Basin? We deliver the Corps, you get debriefed, medical evaluates the bond. Can they remove it? Silence on the radio. 3 seconds. 5. The road poured under my wheels, straight as a scar through the white desert. "We should focus on the road, Palmer. 300 miles. 300 miles. My left arm twitched against the armrest. The turret above moved with it, tracking empty air, waiting for something to point at. My right hand held the wheel. My legs worked the pedals. For now, those were still mine. The sun dropped behind a ridge of eroded rock to the west. The Salt Meridian stretched ahead, under a sky turning the color of a bruise. Somewhere inside the trailer, behind cracked composite panels, the optic plate sat in its housing, oriented at the camera, feeding data through a bond I hadn't asked for into a body I was losing by the mile. I kept driving. 68, the number that kept me alive, the number that carried me closer to something I was beginning to understand I might not come back from. The inspection arch appeared against the last light of the day, a massive steel and concrete frame spanning all 5 lanes, studded with sensor housings. Through the bond I could feel its electromagnetic field from 10 miles out, a low-frequency pressure pushing against the rig's forward sensors like a hand held near a hot surface. "Morrow, inspection arch, 10 miles. "I see it. If the seals were intact, it would wave us through. With 2 red indicators on the breach panel, it's going to flag containment failure and deploy lockdown. Meaning what? Road barriers. Steel plates on hydraulic rams built into the surface. Electromagnetic clamps that target your axles. If those clamps magnetize while you're rolling at 68, the rig flips. So I slow down. You do not slow down. If you stop inside that arch, the containment protocols hand you to a recovery team. Those men don't have a convoy commander managing the bond. They'll cut the trailer open, see the breach, see the optic plate. The first technician who looks at a monitor feed catches what you caught. Except he'll be stranded on foot in a lockdown zone with an uncontained weapon core, bonded to a dead truck without a mission directive or forward momentum. Then how do I get through? You get through fast. The clamps take 4 seconds to magnetize after the arch registers the breach. At 68, you're past the frame in under 2. The barriers will deploy behind you. I'm threading a loaded rig between hydraulic steel plates at highway speed. The core will manage it. He said it simply, like handing me a parachute. My legs began to change. It started in my feet. The soles spread against the pedals, not relaxing but fusing, as if the rubber of my boot soles had bonded with the pedal surfaces. I tried to lift my right foot. The muscles fired. The foot stayed. My calves contracted next, tightening against the seat's lower frame, pressing my shins into a fixed position. Then my knees locked, both at once, freezing at the slight bend of the driving position. I couldn't move my legs. Data crashed into my lower body. Every tire's contact patch with the road, distinct, 6 axles worth of suspension travel measured in fractions of an inch. The flex of the trailer coupling under load. I could feel the road beneath the rig the way bare feet feel a floor. Each crack, each patched seam, each grade change registering as texture against what used to be my soles. Morrow, it's taking my legs. Suspension integration. The core needs your legs to control the drivetrain through the arch. I can't move them. It will handle the maneuver. Acceleration and braking will register as effort in your legs, the way the turret moved through your arm. The arch was 2 miles out. 1. Through the bond, I felt the barrier housings pressurize, their hydraulic systems arming in response to the rig's approach. The sensors had already tagged the seal breach. Lockdown was cycling. The core took over. My right leg slammed the accelerator to the floor. The motion came from inside my thigh, my own quadricep contracting with a force I hadn't commanded. The muscle fiber recruited at maximum capacity. The rig surged to 75, 80. I felt the engine strain in my kneecaps. My left leg worked the brakes in rapid micro-adjustments, each one a calf contraction that translated into precise deceleration on individual axles, fine-tuning the rig's balance for the gap ahead. The arch swallowed the windshield. Barrier plates erupted from the road on both sides, steel slabs rising on hydraulic columns, closing the gap like a vice. The core threaded the rig through at 82 miles per hour. My legs absorbed every correction as labor. A lateral shift registered as a hard pivot on my locked knees. Each impact with a rising barrier fragment hit my shins like a kick. The arch passed overhead. Steel slammed shut on empty road behind us. I could feel the clamps magnetize through the rear axle sensors, a pull that arrived a half-second too late. My legs stayed locked. I tried to shift my weight, tried to lift a heel, flex an ankle, bend a knee. The muscles responded to the core, not to me. My feet worked the pedals at the truck's discretion. My legs were its suspension, its brakes, its grip on the road. Then the cuffs closed. They emerged from the seat frame, curved bands of reinforced composite that hadn't existed during the pre-run inspection. 2 locked around my forearms, pinning my wrists to the armrests. 2 more clamped my calves just below the knee, anchoring my legs to the seat's lower frame. The fit was exact. Each cuff matched the contour of the limb it held, tight enough to prevent withdrawal, shaped to avoid cutting circulation. The cab was a cockpit. The cockpit was a restraint system. I sat inside the truck, the way a brain sits inside a skull, enclosed, integrated, unable to leave. "Morrow, it's locked me in." My voice came out compressed. "The restraints are around my forearms and calves. I can't get out of this seat." Silence. "Morrow, answer me." "I hear you, Palmer. Your arm. 7 years. The brace. You told me the mapping never cleared. Now tell me the rest. Can this be removed?" "It can be transferred to a second person. If that person meets the core's optic plate through an active camera feed while the current pilot stays connected, the bond migrates. The core compares neurological compatibility between the two hosts. It picks the better match. So someone else has to take it. That's the only way the core releases you." The words dropped through me the way a stone drops through still water. Straight down, no resistance, settling somewhere permanent. I sat in the locked seat of a truck that was becoming my body, 4 limbs restrained, a turret wired to my left arm, suspension wired to my legs, hundreds of miles of road stretching toward a facility that... What does Black Basin actually need from us, Morrow? The intake requirement. Is it the core? Or is it the core with a bonded pilot? Palmer, focus on the road. You've been managing this bond since the display came on. You coached me through the first integration. You told me the timing, the sensations, the recovery window, like you were reading from a manual. Now you're telling me the bond can be transferred but not broken. So I'll ask you one more time. Does Black Basin accept an unbonded weapon core, or does it require a pilot already mapped? His silence made the shape of the operation visible, readable at any speed. The compatibility tests I'd never consented to. The convoy commander who'd survived a prior integration. The display prohibition that delayed bonding until the escorts were gone. The order to activate the screen the moment the seals broke. Every piece of it pointed the same direction, toward a facility at the end of a road that accepted only bonded weapons. I was the wrapping. The rig was the package. The core needed a nervous system to call home, and the agency had spent 6 months making sure mine would fit. The bond was a two-way connection. The core had been using me as an output device, mapping its systems onto my motor functions, running its weapons through my nerves. But data traveled both directions through the same channel. My awareness of tire pressure, engine temperature, the sensor mesh, all of it came from the rig to me, meaning the pathway from me to the rig was open too. I started pushing, eyes forward, speed at 68. Morrow's command car a dark shape on the road ahead. Through the bond, I reached past the drivetrain, past the weapons systems, into the rig's electronics, the communications array, the encrypted data storage. The convoy bus wasn't unknown territory. Restricted route drivers handled failed SEAL handshakes, manifest mismatches, dead camera relays. We weren't allowed into command files, but we learned the shape of the system around them, which channel carried cargo telemetry, which table and arch queried, which diagnostic path stayed open after a red seal. The bond turned that practical knowledge into touch. Finding the files was like reaching into a dark room whose walls I'd repaired from the outside for years. My awareness moved along familiar junctions until it caught the shape I needed. Transmission logs. Encrypted packets sent to the rig's onboard computer before departure. I couldn't read them the way I'd read a screen. The data arrived as blocks of meaning, assembling themselves into comprehension the same way tire pressure assembled into sensation. The first file was my personnel record. Fragments clarified. Neurological compatibility assessment. Class 4 integration potential, scored by a department whose name I didn't recognize. The tests from the Barstow medical review, the visual tracking, the nerve conduction, the spinal scan, hadn't been baseline measurements. They'd been an audition. My compatibility score was in the 98th percentile. I'd been selected the way you select a component for an engine, tested for fit, filed for installation. The second file was Morrow's mission directive, transmitted from the agency's logistics command 48 hours before the convoy departed. The critical line arrived with surgical clarity. Class 4 autonomous cores will be accepted at Black Basin only with confirmed, stable, integrated pilot. Pilot must demonstrate full motor mapping across primary limb groups. Partial integration is grounds for intake refusal. Another block explained the speed floor. Static configuration is sustained by continuous transit flag. Vehicle velocity must remain at or above 60 miles per hour. Loss of transit flag initiates autonomous deployment and host acquisition. The next instruction finished the design. If optic integration has not occurred before basin approach, Commander will declare internal seal verification fault and direct pilot to activate cargo camera. Do not disclose intake pilot requirement. The scavengers hadn't created the plan. They had only moved it forward. If the shell had stayed intact, Morrow would have made me look another way. They wanted the crate delivered inside someone. I said nothing on the radio. Morrow would be monitoring my integration, listening for speech changes, response time delays, signs of cognitive degradation. I kept my voice normal when he pinged me. 68, holding, all systems nominal. The voice of a tired driver on a long haul, nothing more. Inside the bond, I kept working. The command car sent a telemetry query the moment I touched the camera routing table. A clean pulse, then Morrow's voice. Palmer, I'm seeing a verification request from your cargo bus. I pushed the inspection arch's stale seal packet into the open diagnostic path and let the red indicators answer for me. Arch left a manual review handshake hanging after the breach. I'm clearing it before Basin rejects the manifest. A pause. I could feel his vehicle polling my network, checking the route I'd named. The seal channel was real. The failed handshake was real enough now that I'd put the old packet there. Don't open the cargo feed, he said. Wasn't planning to. The command car query withdrew. I left the diagnostic path open beneath the cleared flag, narrow enough to hide in, wide enough to carry video when I needed it. The rig's camera array had expanded since the Corps started modifying the vehicle. The original trailer camera was still active, and the Corps had added 4 more, 2 on the roof, 1 on each flank, as part of its defensive upgrades. Through the bond, I could switch between feeds, direct their aim, and choose where they were sent. The convoy's encrypted network linked my rig to Morrow's command car and carried radio, telemetry, cargo status, and video. Black Basin's security checkpoints used the same network. After the convoy commander authenticated, a red seal arrival automatically opened the manual review channel so intake had to see the damage before rejecting the freight. Any connected screen could receive a feed I routed through that channel, including the trailer interior camera and the optic plate. The plan took shape with the clarity of something I should have seen 100 miles ago. Morrow's command car was stripped of every screen and mirror. He knew what the optic plate did, so he'd made sure it could never reach him. Black Basin's security gate had a verification terminal connected to the convoy network. Standard intake protocol required the convoy commander to exit his vehicle, approach the terminal on foot, confirm credentials, and verify cargo status. Morrow would step out of his stripped car, walk to the terminal, and look at the screen. I would put the optic plate on that screen. The transfer required 2 things. The second person had to meet the Corps' gaze through an active feed, while the current pilot stayed connected. The cuffs ensured I would remain connected. All I needed was Morrow's eyes on the right screen at the right moment. The road surface collapsed 50 miles past the arch. A stretch where old service roads intersected the meridian at shallow angles, their surfaces buckled upward by decades of thermal cycling, had turned the asphalt into a field of jagged ridges. The rig hit them at speed. Each impact drove through the suspension, through my locked legs, each jolt landing in my calves like a blow. Then the road dropped out entirely. A sinkhole wider than any I'd crossed swallowed the front wheels. The cab pitched forward. The steering column caught me across the chest. Through the bond, I felt the chassis torque. the trailer coupling twisting, the frame flexing past its tolerances. The core responded. Pressure spread across my shoulders, my ribcage, my abdomen. Integration mapped the cab's structural reinforcement onto my torso, muscle by muscle. When the rear wheels dropped into the same hole, the impact traveled through the chassis, through the cab, through the bond, into my body. It hit like a full-body collision. My ribs absorbed the compression. My spine took the vertical shock. The truck's armor was my skeleton. The rig climbed out on momentum. The core was already repairing the frame. I could feel it working, small adjustments registering as a deep ache across my ribs. 4 limbs mapped, torso mapped. I sat wired into a machine by my own nervous system, scanning the road for the facility designed to keep me here permanently. Morrow's voice broke through. "Palmer, you've been quiet. It's been a long run. Your speech is normal. Response latency is stable. Integration is progressing well. Glad one of us thinks so. 200 miles, Palmer. You're doing well." I let him believe I was broken. On the inside, behind the bond's two-way connection, I was running the camera feeds, rehearsing the override I'd execute at Black Basin's gate. Black Basin announced itself through the bond before I saw it, a change in the electromagnetic landscape, dense, structured, radiating from the horizon, military infrastructure, deep-buried systems, the kind of facility that showed up on the rig's sensors as a solid wall of signal. The road narrowed from 5 lanes to 3, then to 2, funneling between concrete blast barriers topped with sensor arrays. Fresh pavement, bright lane markings. After hundreds of miles of cracked asphalt, abandoned service stations, and buried ordnance, the approach corridor looked like civilization. In function, it was a slaughterhouse chute built to funnel freight into the intake zone. Morrow's voice came through the radio. "Palmer, before we arrive, let me say something." "Go ahead." "I have 19 men in my logistics unit. If this mission fails, every one of them gets reassigned to penal transport, hauling condemned equipment through contamination zones until their exposure limits are reached. I get permanent medical confinement. My unit is dissolved. 19 careers gone. You're telling me this so I understand why you did it. I'm telling you because I want you to know the choice wasn't casual. These weapons will be deployed whether experienced officers manage the process or not. If I'm involved, I have influence. If I'm confined to a medical ward, someone worse takes my place, someone without the knowledge or restraint. Anomalous logistics doesn't stop because one officer develops a conscience. That's a real pretty argument, Morrow. You practice it on the last driver too? I was the last driver. 7 years ago, when the first core took my arm, I went through the integration alone, without anyone who understood enough to explain what was happening to my body. I lived through it. After they transferred the bond, I spent 2 years fighting to get back to operational status. I believed then, and I still believe, that someone who has been through integration should manage the next pilot instead of an administrator reading a manual. He paused. When he continued, his voice was quieter. Pilots report the pain giving way to a kind of equilibrium once integration completes. The core wants a stable platform, Palmer. You'll reach a point where the truck feels like your body, because it is your body. The words become a physical state. A state I didn't choose. You didn't choose it. It was the most honest thing he'd said on the entire run. It was also the most damning, because honesty doesn't undo anything. He understood exactly what the institution did to its people. He'd chosen to keep serving it because the alternative was someone worse filling his chair. The logic was sound. It still ended with me bolted to a seat I'd never leave. I kept my argument and my plan buried. "How far?" I asked. 12 miles. The security gate will require me to verify credentials at a checkpoint terminal. Standard intake protocol. I'll exit my vehicle, confirm the convoy's status, authorize the cargo transfer. Black Basin's intake crew handles the rest. "Palmer, from here on the integration is painless. I let the lie sit on the channel. Inside the bond, I positioned the camera feeds. The trailer's interior camera, the one that showed the optic plate, still centered, still staring at the lens, was cued to override any display on the convoy's network the moment I pushed the signal. All I needed was for Morrow to look at a screen. Black Basin's security gate materialized out of the blast barrier corridor, a fortified checkpoint spanning the road, lit by overhead floods, with a guard station on the left and a credential bay recessed on the right. A low concrete island separated the bay from the freight lane. Its verification terminal, an 18-inch high-resolution screen mounted at standing height, faced the open lane and connected to the convoy network for cargo manifest review. Morrow's command car slowed. His brake lights flared red in the corridor's harsh lighting. He pulled into the recessed bay, leaving the freight lane open, and stopped with his door beside the terminal island. I brought the rig to a crawl in the freight lane, its bumper 18 feet short of the island. Through the bond, I could feel every component of the truck's electronic systems, each one waiting for my input. Against the cuff, my left arm twitched while the turret tracked overhead. The core worked the brake pedals through my legs. My torso ached beneath the phantom weight of armor plating. Morrow's door opened. He stepped out. He was thinner than I'd imagined from his voice, narrow-shouldered, wind-burned, wearing a desert tan uniform that hung loose on his frame. His right arm was encased in a black stabilization brace bolted at the elbow, wrist and shoulder, keeping the limb rigid at his side. He walked towards the terminal. He entered his credentials on a keypad mounted below the display. The terminal loaded the convoy manifest, route number, vehicle registration, cargo classification. Morrow leaned forward to read the status fields. I pushed the feed. Through the bond, I rerouted the trailer interior camera to the verification terminal's display input. The manifest vanished. The screen filled with the grey-green wash of the containment camera, the cracked inner casing, the housing, the optic plate. Morrow saw it. Recognition reached him before the bond did. He jerked his face aside and struck the terminal's isolation key with his left palm. "Cut convoy video," he ordered. "Isolate the freight bus. Do it now." The manifest flashed back onto the screen. A status bar appeared beneath it. Network segmentation. 4 seconds. I drove the optic feed through the manual review channel again. The terminal tried to reject it. I forced the red seal packet ahead of the image, the same priority flag used when an arch demanded visual proof of a breach. The manifest disappeared. The optic plate returned. Morrow kept his head turned, eyes squeezed shut, one hand working the keypad by touch. "Palmer, close the channel. You don't know what a contested transfer does." The bond split inside me. My left shoulder convulsed against the cuff. The turret above the cab snapped toward the terminal, tracking the movement of the nearest guard. My fingers began to close. I forced them open until the joints shook, holding the firing contacts apart while the camera route bucked under Morrow's isolation command. The rig crept forward. My feet pressed and released the brakes in quick, conflicting motions as the core divided its attention between two nervous systems. 10 feet of asphalt disappeared beneath the bumper. One guard raised his rifle. The other reached for a red disconnect lever on the terminal post. I found the trailer's emergency air circuit through the freight diagnostics and dumped pressure into all 6 axles. The brakes locked hard enough to throw my torso against the restraints. Pain went through my mapped ribs. The truck stopped with its bumper 8 feet short of the terminal island, the command car protected inside the recessed bay. The guard's hand closed around the disconnect lever. I held the review channel open by keeping the breach flag alive, answering every isolation request with the one condition Black Basin's own intake system was forbidden to ignore. Damaged Class 4 cargo awaiting visual confirmation. The status bar counted down. 2 seconds. 1. Visual confirmation required flashed over the feed. A 6-digit cancel code began cycling beneath it, the terminal's safeguard against blind shutdown of a live Class 4 review. Morrow's hand stopped on the keypad. He could keep his eyes closed and lose the segmentation window, or look long enough to kill the channel. He opened his eyes. The optic plate was waiting. His body went rigid. I watched it happen through the rig's flank camera, his shoulders locking, his head snapping back a quarter inch, his left hand seizing the terminal post for balance. His right arm, the arm in the brace, spasmed first. The brace groaned against the bolts as the limb inside it fought to move, copying the rig's steering column 14 feet behind him. The guard pulled the disconnect lever. The terminal went black, a fraction too late. Then the bond hit Morrow. The core, sensing a second nervous system through the active feed, ran its comparison. I felt it happening inside the bond, a shift in the data flow, a branching, as if the current that had been running through my body alone had found a second path. The core evaluated Morrow's neurological signature against mine. Morrow had prior integration mapping, partially compatible architecture, known pathways the core could reopen without building from scratch. He was a better fit, an easier completion. The bond migrated. The release was not clean. Each mapped system disconnected from my nervous system individually, and each disconnection was its own injury. The turret pulled free from my left arm first, a tearing sensation that ran from my shoulder to my fingertips, as if something adhesive had been ripped from the underside of my skin. My arm went slack against the armrest cradle. The fingers went slack. I could feel the absence of the turret the way you feel a pulled tooth, the nerve still expecting something that isn't there, sending signals into empty space. My legs released next. The pedal contact broke. My feet came loose from the surfaces they'd been fused to. My calves unlocked, my knees slackened as far as the restraints allowed, and for a moment my legs were just dead weight, numb, unresponsive, pins and needles flooding from my hips to my toes. Then sensation returned in patches, wrong, delayed, each muscle group answering my commands a half-beat late. The torso mapping peeled away last, the structural integration releasing its hold on my ribcage, my spine, my shoulders. Every rib ached. My back felt hollow, as if the armor plating that had been mapped onto my skeleton had left cavities where it pulled free. The cuffs opened, the composite bands around my forearms retracted into the seat frame, the calf restraints released. For the first time since the arch, I could move my limbs independently. I reached for the door handle with my right hand. The fingers worked, slowly, clumsily, as if I were wearing gloves 2 sizes too large, but they worked. The handle turned. The door swung open. Desert air, cool with evening, rushed into the cab. I put my left foot on the step rail. It held my weight, barely. I lowered myself from the cab the way you'd climb down a ladder with broken rungs, testing each hold, trusting nothing. My boots hit the asphalt of the Black Basin Approach Road. I stood. My legs held. They didn't feel like my legs. The signals from my brain arrived late, traveled through damaged channels, produced movements that were approximate rather than precise. My left knee buckled on every other step. My right foot dragged, the toe catching the pavement. Behind me, the rig's engine revved without a driver in the seat. The turret above the cab traversed in a slow arc, tracking something I couldn't see. The truck was finding its new pilot. Morrow was on the ground beside the terminal. His body was rigid. The stabilization brace on his right arm had cracked, the bolts sheared by a force they were never rated for. The cracked brace had released his right arm. For the first time in 7 years, it moved freely, copying the rig's steering column with perfect fidelity. His fingers gripped empty air in the exact pattern of the wheel 14 feet away. Against the asphalt, his left arm was already pressed flat, fingers splayed, seeking contact points that didn't exist yet on the pavement but would exist soon enough inside a cab. His eyes were open. He was aware. He understood what was happening to him with a clarity no other person could match, because he was the only man on this road who had felt it before. 2 checkpoint guards were already on their radios, reporting a delivery. The terminal had rebooted to a plain intake screen. Lines populated one at a time beneath the cargo number. Integrated pilot. Morrow, Frank. Prior Class 4 mapping, verified. Intake condition, accepted. One guard read the last line into his radio. Pilot substitution accepted. Platform remains viable. Send the restraint crew. Both guards kept their distance from Morrow and me. One stepped between the terminal and the rig, protecting the equipment while Morrow lay rigid at the guard's boots. Protocol, probably. Preserve the platform. Document the arrival. Let medical sort the discarded personnel from the active component. I walked past the checkpoint on legs that stuttered with every step. Nobody stopped me. I was a spent part. The vehicle had ejected me the way a machine ejects a worn bearing, intact enough to roll free, too damaged to reinstall. Behind me, the rig's engine changed pitch. The idle settled into something deeper, steadier, the rhythm of a machine that had found what it was looking for. Morrow's radio, still clipped to his belt on the ground beside the terminal, clicked once. The sound carried across the quiet checkpoint, small in the open air. I kept walking. Through the gate, past the barrier walls, onto the gravel shoulder beyond the checkpoint's perimeter lighting, where the desert opened up under a sky full of more stars than I'd seen since Barstow. My left knee buckled. I caught myself, straightened, took another step. The movement cost me effort that used to be automatic, every stride a negotiation between what my brain commanded, what my nerves transmitted, and what my muscles chose to do about the difference. Somewhere behind me, the agency would debrief what had happened. They'd document my residual nerve damage. They'd classify the run as a successful proof of concept. Pilot bonded, core delivered, integration viable under field conditions. They'd note that the final pilot wasn't the one they'd selected. They'd adjust the protocol for next time. There would be a next time. There would be another driver, another sealed trailer, another laminated card zip-tied to a sun visor. I fixed my eyes on the road beyond the checkpoint. The rig, Morrow, and the terminal where the optic plate had appeared receded behind me. Looking back is how it starts.